The starting point is the topic for today relates to conserving futures and ties in with the work that YES does through its implementation partners in the fields of conservation. So we've got some great partners there, and Farah will take you through it. But what we've been doing with these webinars is trying to talk through the external host placement model. So for those who are not familiar with YES, you have the option of either hosting youth inside your organization or moving them into external placement. So Farah's got a scoring module. They've got 31 or 35 implementation partners that she works with in all sorts of different fields. And for the purposes of today, we are looking at the sector of conservation and the type of jobs you can create through that. And it's high social impact as we go along. So just as a quick introduction, we've got our hashtags. I hope to see you guys all hashtagging us on the social media. It's always nice to get a bit of a boost from that, and kind of share some of the success stories. So just again, a reminder, what are we trying to solve when it comes to YES? We're trying to solve this problem. I can't get a job without experience. I can't get experience without a job. And in South Africa, we know that the challenges and the access and accessibility for youth to get into work experience is incredibly high. The challenges there remain everything from social mobility, the ability to get to and from a job interview, the ability to actually go and fulfill your job. I mean, I had a corporate sponsor earlier in the week where half his cohort had dropped off, and we were trying to get to the bottom of why he had such poor attention. And it turned out that most of his youth were struggling to simply get to and from work. It wasn't a well-built program in that respect, and the youth were spending a significant amount of time getting to and from work. And by the time they hit the middle of the month, they didn't have the money to get to their job, and so they were simply not attending. And then the corporate sponsor was saying that then the corporate sponsor is frustrated by the fact that these youth aren't fulfilling their work experience and ultimately dropped off. So we're really trying, it's not a learnership, it's not an internship. The purpose of YES is to effectively give a quality 12-month work experience. And I just want to maybe touch on this definition of a QWE before we move on. A big part of the function that YES does, and a big part of the function that Farah does, is to ensure that these youth actually get this quality work experience. That is everything from a contract of employment. She has some of the challenges where she's had to find and identify corporate funders who have stopped paying youth salaries. There have been labor abuses, et cetera, et cetera. So this monitoring evaluation function that YES fulfills is intent to go and talk to this concept of a quality work experience. Do youth have a legally binding legal employment contract? Do the youth get paid consistently? Do they have a supervisor? Do they have an HR function that they can understand? Do they have a place where they can go and ask things where they don't understand? I mean, Farah's team probably does about 1,800 calls a week just to engage with youth to understand and ensure that that quality work experience is happening. You guys will be familiar with the mobile phones, which we'll also talk about shortly. But really this concept is that we want to ensure that these youth get a real work experience that makes them more employable and allows them to be able to break into the job market as they're going along. So I say this is just a quick look at the agenda. We're changing this up a little bit. We're going to push the hubs, smartphones and costings down to the end, but we're looking forward to discussing we're letting Farah and Andrew talk through the core work that they do up front, and then we'll field some Q&A at the end. So YES provides a 12-month quality work experience to unemployed youth. Experience on a CV and reference letter triples the likelihood of a callback within 3 months of a job search. A reference letter doubles the chances of employment for women. And with companies being able to get up to 2 full levels on their BBBE scorecard through the creation of YES jobs. I don't know if any of you have taken time to have a look at that NIDSCRAM survey, which was released, and interestingly, we were looking at it yesterday just from a gender perspective. But there were youth that had they basically look at the difference between male and female, and women having to pick up a massive amount of extra social hours in terms of looking after children, trying to fill in for things like early childhood development centers, etc. So really, the idea is if you get precluded from the workforce as a youth, it becomes increasingly difficult to be able to build up that social capital, that reference letter, and simply somebody to validate that you can actually do the job that you are kind of targeting or looking to move into. So the purpose behind YES is a piece of BE legislation that ultimately says we will reward you with a level up on your BE scorecard if you create a certain number of youth jobs. And we'll take you through the formula later on, but I really want to kind of focus on just the high level stuff around YES, and then we'll work down to your specific queries. So just in terms of good news stories, and I'm pretty sure there's a gong about to go off at the office this morning. We're about to go through 60,000 youth jobs since inception. That has achieved and measured since 1 January 2019. One of the questions we often get asked is, well, YES was supposed to do 1 million youth jobs. And there was a perception that YES was out there to simply kind of change the employment landscape in the country. The reality is YES was only a small cog in the entire, in terms of this employment legislation that was out there. Yes, COVID has had a significant impact on it, but YES has done a fair amount of really powerful work in terms of getting youth into the workforce. There's over 1,500 partner companies involved with YES at the moment, and over 3.4 billion rands worth of youth salaries have been created since 1 January 2019. And what's very cool about that, and some of you guys will be familiar with it, there's a map which just shows how the salaries get deployed across the country. One of the big challenges we have in South Africa is that a lot of your funds sit very much in the Joburg or Gauteng and in the Western Cape, in the Cape region. So there's lots of challenges in terms of being able to create jobs. And this is where we're really excited about the work that Andrew, for instance, is doing, is that jobs get created where they really do need to be created, and the employment pathways are ultimately created. So this is just some high level numbers. It's always satisfying to be able to say we do some good work. These are just some of the numbers to look at. This is a stat, this 32 to 42% absorption rate is something we get asked a lot about. Is, if you look at the legislation requires either 2.5% or 5% absorption on your youth programs. But the reality is that, and look, this number is a rolling number, but once youth are given the opportunity through YES, they ultimately end up being absorbed. 1 out of 3 or 4 out of 10 end up being absorbed. So that's a fantastic success story. In terms of level ups, my good friend Tracy Chican actually sent a note yesterday saying we're underselling ourselves here. We've done over 600 level ups on the BEE scorecard since inception. That's a really powerful testament to a piece of legislation that works really well. We've got organizations back for their 3rd and 4th years of participation in YES. And we're really, this is the metric that we as a team very much measure ourselves around, is the legislation being effectively applied, or is it understood by the consultants? Is it understood by the verification agencies? And are businesses ultimately getting the level up that they invest for? And the answer is yes, they are. And we are very pleased with that number there. All youth that participate in the YES program receive a YES smartphone, and the purpose of that smartphone is to help YES comply with its monitoring evaluation function. There are apps, there are modules, but there are over 9 million learning minutes have been done with those youth since the inception of the YES program. And, as the kind of smartphone strategy has been rolled out over the last, particularly under Faraz's leadership over the last 18 months, there has been a significant increase in the engagement around those YES smartphones. We're very pleased about that. And it does form a very important part or critical part of the YES monitoring evaluation function. Just in terms of proven track record, we always love to be able to put up a bit of a brag sheet. These are just some of the organizations that are participating in YES at the moment. And what's important there is that there are, whether it's a big multinational or it's down to a QSE that's working with YES, they are able to go and engage. They can use the legislation. They can create jobs, either BEE or non-BEE purposes. And we have a lot of fun doing it, and we can kind of tick the different boxes. Just a reminder again, when we talk about different boxes, there's obviously the BEE legislation. So that's the YES incentive, but we've also got some opportunities around enterprise and supplier development. Some of you will be very familiar about some of the work we're doing there. And then the one thing that people always forget is that YES is a public benefit organization and not-for-profit company. So we are able to issue Section 18 certificates for donations. We will be engaging with a number of the corporate sponsors in this respect coming up. But we particularly as we're rolling out that YES Hub strategy, we've got opportunities for organizations to keep some money from the taxman and do a bit more social good. So we'll definitely be knocking on the door to go with some of you to engage around that. Just again, testimonials, it always helps when there's real people involved. But, you know, whether we're looking at VW South Africa, who've been one of the big supporters of YES as we've gone along. YES Initiative is one of the most hopeful, impactful, and necessary interventions in our country. We're proud to be partners with this powerful program. And while the youth unemployment stats in our country may be staggering, there are many challenges. YES reminds us that these challenges are not insurmountable. And I mean, Nedbank have been doing some very good work with YES at all sorts of different levels and have been one of the big partners for us. And just, you know, the type of jobs that they create are important. And, you know, when a big corporate sponsor throws their weight behind it, it makes a big difference in terms of evidence of success. And we use this to be able to go and motivate for additional sponsors to join the YES program. In terms of how you can get involved with YES, I've just mentioned, you obviously got the placement of YES Youth, enterprise development, we've got some skills development programs, SED opportunities, and then your Section 18A tax certificate. For those who are not familiar with the calculation, I'm just going to very quickly run you through this, and then I'm going to jump to Farai. I'm just cognizant of time. You can effectively, there are 3 calculations that you will do to calculate your YES target, and to do this, there's a very handy calculator on the YES website. Most common formula is 1.5% of net profit after tax divided by 55,000. So it's a 3-year net profit after tax. 1.5% of headcount, or there are some revenue tables that you'll have a look at there. Happy to work with any corporate where there are some nuances, whether you are a specialized entity. So for instance, we're seeing quite a lot of specialized entities coming on board. There are some opportunities for QSEs, and there are opportunities for whether you are doing, whether you've got a higher headcount, low profit. There's 3 different formulas to be able to go and calculate your YES target. 3 options here, and people often get this wrong. You can get 2 full levels on your BEE scorecard in the first year of participation with YES. You don't have to do 1 year and then come back and do another year to get those 2 levels. You have the option of either 1 level on your BEE scorecard and do 2.5% absorption, 1 level plus 3 bonus points. We're seeing a lot of interest in this particular offering at the moment. So you'll do 1.5 times your YES target and do 5% absorption, or a full 2 levels on your BEE scorecard. So that's just high level what YES will do, and it'll help you move up. We've seen organizations, multinational organizations, that struggle to comply with the ownership element of YES, and they are able to go and then move 2 full levels on their scorecard. And we've seen them get right up to level 1 in certain instances. As I said, there's a couple of options with YES. The first option is host the youth internally inside of your organizations. What Farai is going to talk about, she's just going to introduce the YES implementation partner model, and then Andrew's going to give you a practical example of how these IPs work, and then between us, we will field some questions from the audience. Farai, I'm going to jump to your preso. Are you ready to go from your side?
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Very ready.
Cool. All righty. So for those who don't know Farai is arguably she's our public speaker of record. She is a fabulous presenter. She is passionate about youth employment. You can follow her on Instagram. She really is an inspirational member of the team, and she's going to run you through how the YES implementation partner model works. So Farai, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mark, for the introduction, and no pressure at all. I think you've set me up for a high level of expectations here. Very good morning to everyone. My name is Farai, and as Mark said, I work with the implementation partner team at YES. For me, the implementation partner model is definitely my favorite model at YES. And as I take you through briefly what exactly this model is actually about, you'll then be convinced about why this is my favorite model, and hopefully it'll be your favorite model as well. So Mark, onto the next slide. Basically, the implementation partners are really, really important partners that exist within the YES ecosystem. These are partners who YES has vetted extensively, and they are across various sectors and industries. At present, we've got 31 partners across 10 different industries, ranging from tech, healthcare, finance, education, manufacturing, marketing, SMMEs, and for this webinar today, your conservation partners. We've got two incredible partners within the conservation space, and that is the Africa Foundation and also Conservation South Africa. Just before I deep dive into the information about these two partners, what's really important to note about the implementation partner model is that we understand that for corporates to get their BEE level up, they have to create youth jobs through YES. And at times, corporates may not have the space internally or even the capacity to be able to host youth. And what the implementation partner model allows corporates to do, it's actually a turnkey solution for corporates. It allows corporates to have youth hosted by a vetted YES partner. And beyond the hosting, these partners are responsible for recruiting the youth, screening the youth, collecting the documentation of these youth, placing them into quality work experience, guiding the journey of these youth, supervising them, ensuring that they are engaging on their YES apps, offboarding the youth, and facilitating absorption on behalf of the corporate. So when Mark mentioned much earlier in the conversation that from a legislative perspective, absorption would either be 2.5% or 5% for the corporate, depending on the level up that they are going for, our implementation partners would need to do this for you. So we do have incredible partners. We monitor them really, really thoroughly each month. Mark mentioned the scorecard system that we have, and our partners know that to be featured on what we call the jobs menu, and the slide you're looking at now is an extract from the jobs menu, which is what is shown to corporates when they are picking their implementation partner of choice. To be featured on this menu, our partners have to have a score of 60% or higher. And these two partners, which we'll be talking you through today, who are within the conservation space, are really incredible partners who are able to give youth quality work experience that is not only transforming the lives of those youth, but also the communities they come from. And as I talk you through Conservation South Africa and the Africa Foundation briefly, and Andrew will give you way more detail about Africa Foundation, I'll just share two youth stories with you, which have been absolutely incredible, and I hope will speak to the impact of our partners within the conservation space. So let's get into the first partner we have working on conservation, which is Conservation South Africa, a really fantastic partner of YES. They are committed to helping society adapt sustainable approaches to development and to consider nature at each turn. Youth who are working for CSA work in various projects looking at food and water security, climate resilience, ecotourism, and they gain incredible skills like crop farming, environmental restoration, social development. They're within the agriculture and the conservation space, and CSA really, really does have a wide reach extending to 5 provinces in our beautiful country. And they've got an incredibly high capacity to take on that's just over 1,000 youth. To quickly share with you 2 stories from Conservation South Africa, just to bring this more home for us so that we can realize that, behind this implementation partner, there is impact on the ground. I just want to read you all a short quote from one of the youth who is based in Eastern Cape, named Umeza. And they said, "The YES experience has changed me a lot already. I can tell my community how to keep livestock healthy, and I am leading by example to my family and my community as a whole. I've learned how to be responsible when it comes to nature, and I now know how to treat animals in a good way." So the skills that these youth gain working at these implementation partners go beyond just doing yes for BEE, but actually transforming the lives of young people on the ground and giving them a sense of purpose and transferring new skills and new sets of information to them. So I really, really hope that the story of Bumeza just brings this home and highlights the incredible work youth are doing and what they're able to learn. Thanks, Mark. On to the next slide. So the Africa Foundation is also a really fantastic implementation partner of ours. We've got Andrew, who is the CEO of Africa Foundation here, who's on the call as well. So I won't take you through the Africa Foundation in too much detail, because I think Andrew would do a much better job at just sharing the incredible work they do. But we're really, really excited to be working with the Africa Foundation, a relatively new partner within YES. They operate in 73 communities, which is really, really fantastic. And they care for people, land, and wildlife. Youth who are working for the Africa Foundation develop expertise ranging from the removal of alien plants, the restoration of your degraded areas, and development and maintenance of social infrastructure. The Africa Foundation actually recently received their first cohort of YES youth, about 100 YES youth, and they've still got capacity for an additional 400 youth across the KZN and also the Mpumalanga regions. Youth gain incredible skills from ecotourism, waste management, infrastructure development, and they're of course within the conservation and the agricultural sector as well. So really, really exciting work that our implementation partners do. And especially within the conservation space, we are seeing the importance of climate resilience in Africa. And so it makes it that much more important that we can bring and have such incredible partners on board. So for corporates and for BE agents who are here on the call, if you're looking to really have an impact within various communities across South Africa, especially doing conservation work, then Conservation South Africa and the Africa Foundation are the partners for you, and they will give you a turnkey solution that beyond BEE is able to have incredible impact within your communities. So big thank you to Mark for hosting the webinar, and I'll hand over now back to Mark and to Andrew.
Thanks, Farah. It was much appreciated. I think what we often don't, what a lot of people don't see behind the scenes is, some of the learnings that YES has taken out of this, out of this process of building out this implementation partner model. Whether it is simple things like BEE compliance and an understanding of the BEE legislation, it is financial stability that these organizations are vetted for. One of the there's a situation at the moment with one of the partners where they've effectively run out of operating cash. And there's not a YES implementation partner, it's a partner company that we've been brought in to see if we can assist. But they are they've run out of operating cash. And so, one of the things that the YES has to do is actually vet these partners all the time. And it's not just a case of, well, we think you're a nice project and we'll go and support you. We have to do some very stringent, the CFO gets involved, there's a vetting process that gets involved, and it's an ongoing partnership that is happening all the time. And the partners are often called into account for how they're running projects and what they're building out. We always talk about it being head and heart. I mean, the heart says we want to do good things and we want to have social impact, but the head says we've got to get these things right and we've got to constantly reevaluate ourselves. Management of big payrolls, there is a whole lot of different elements that are needed to be considered there. And just before I hand over to Andrew, I just want to quickly touch on the typical contracting framework here in terms of this implementation partner model. The one question we get asked is, how does the contracting framework work, particularly when you're placing youth, for instance, in the Africa Foundation? So just high level, there are two considerations. It is, does the youth actually appear on your employment, on your payroll, and are you a direct employer? So in terms of this cohort, for instance, that has been placed with Andrew and his team, They are the direct employer of these youth. They enter into a two-party employment contract with the youth. And the reason for that is that the corporate funder behind that is a multinational that doesn't want to extend its headcount and obviously have the impact then on skills, etc. So the implementation partner becomes the employer on record. Some partners want to be very involved with their IP partners. Some just want a kind of arm's length relationship with them. They are at there are different options and different ways to tackle it. And then ultimately the payroll administration typically in that case will be run through the implementation partner. So every month they have to submit a verified payroll through to Farai and her team. They will verify that these youth actually are still on the program, any replacements, etc., that have been brought through. And they will then go and say, great, we've got money sitting in a trust account for you. You've complied. We are happy to release the funds. If, for instance, you haven't complied and you haven't got your documentation in, they, yes, will not release its funds. There's a very strict process that's in place there at the moment. And, you know, again, I always talk head and heart, but the head side of it is really a critical part of the backbone and infrastructure to be able to drive the yes implementation partner model. So I've spoken enough about head. I'd like to hand over to Andrew to talk a little bit about the heart and what actually done at the coalface in terms of the youth jobs that are being created. Andrew, I'm going to jump to your slides. Are you ready to go from your side?
I am. Thanks so much, Mark.
Great. I'm going to jump to your slide. I don't know if you want to do a quick introduction to who you are, and then I'm going to hand over to you.
That's fantastic. Yeah, and then if you could, I'll just prompt you to move the slides through.
Absolutely.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Really is super exciting to be here. So I have the privilege of leading the Africa Foundation and have recently been working with YES to establish Africa Foundation as an implementer and to get it going because I believe in YES. In my previous role with another organization, the Wildlands Conservation Trust, we had a large YES program. We saw the difference it made. And we saw that in particular, we saw the difference it made to the lives and career trajectories of youth in disadvantaged communities. Next slide, please. So Africa Foundation works at the interface between conservation and community development. And we really relate to this quote, Nelson Mandela quote. I know that Nelson Mandela gets quoted a lot, and that's because of the wisdom that he shared with us. Ultimately, conservation is about people. If you don't have sustainable development around parks, then people have no interest in them and parks will not survive. And of course, that extends through conservation landscapes. We've been operating for 30 years. We have a main operational base here in South Africa, and we're setting up satellites in a number of the countries we work in. We also are supported by fundraising efforts out of the US and UK. We work in 73 communities across 6 countries at the moment. We have an embedded partnership with And Beyond, the hospitality group, and generally work in communities associated with And Beyond lodges and the landscapes, conservation and seascapes that they operate in, with a focus around care for the land, for the wildlife, and for the people. Next slide, please. In South Africa, we have 2 project nodes. We have one in northern KZN, attached to the Isimangaliso World Heritage Area. The Anchor and Beyond partnership there is with Pinda. Many of you will have heard of that. We work in 5 communities there. And then in Mpumalanga, we are linked to lodges associated with the Sabi Sands, so Kirkman's and Tingile, and then Timbavati. Our focus is on the sustainable development of the communities we work in. And we adopt a community-led approach to that. And there's a trajectory that happens over time. So in South Africa, we've worked with most of our communities for over 20 years. And generally, we start off with a foundation around health and education. And then we move forward from there. So we build clinics, we build primary schools, secondary schools, ECDs. We've got a fantastic bursary program. Currently have 125 kids at university. And then over the last 6 years, we've really started focusing on creating local opportunity for this great talent that's coming through these improved facilities. Next slide, please. So the partnership that we have in place now with YES has started with 100 placements, and we're deeply grateful for that, and looking to grow this over the next while. And these are spread across, at the moment, 4 types of placement. And I thought I'd just spend a bit of time sharing what these look like. So the first one is a placement around conservation and ecosystem restoration work. Simply put, land care work. We have 40 placements at the moment, 20 in partnership with a community restitution trust that we work with, the Makasa Land Claims Community Trust. And then another 20 with the Zuka Game Reserve, but in that context, working very closely with the Ngwenya Land Claims Trust. So what's interesting here is that we are embedded with communities that are committed to conservation, and we're underwriting their work. Our second set of placements is work in the schools that we work in these communities. We currently have 30 placements embedded in a program that we have called our ECHO, as in we want environmental stewardship to resonate in the communities we work in. And these individuals are placed in the schools delivering a curriculum that we have developed and are putting in place. Most of these placements are, in fact, individuals that are qualified as teachers and haven't been able to find work. And so it's a fantastic step up in that space. Next slide, please. Then off the back of our partnership with And Beyond, we have at the moment 20 individuals that are actually placed in lodges that are getting functional experience of what it is to work in a high-end hospitality environment, ranging from the front side hospitality skills through to the back end housekeeping, maintenance, and ground keeping space. They will get experience in everything across that space. Next slide, please. And then behind the scenes, of course, none of this is possible without your core office ability. And so we have a team of 10 individuals that are embedded in admin type placements, both within ourselves, within And Beyond, and then also within the Sabi Sands environment. Thank you. Right. So that's our first step. We've got plenty of opportunities. So, we're open for business in this context. We're so excited about the potential here. These are work placements in deep rural communities. And if we get this right, these individuals will find employment in those environments and continue to work there. So in addition to additional land care, environmental education, tourism, and we've also got some admin options. We've also got 3 other models that we are looking to fill. So within the lodges, there is a real opportunity to have individuals placed with the maintenance teams. And so they're learning the practical skills of how you maintain, so from a plumbing, electricity, painting, building. We've got a similar opportunity to roll out in our communities where, by virtue of the fact that we have built and continue to build, schools, clinics, and other infrastructure, there's a need to provide ongoing maintenance for that. And so we would like to start establishing our own teams that are providing support for the maintenance of community infrastructure. And then a project we have coming online around food gardens is a super next opportunity where at every facility that we're involved in, we're looking to establish vibrant food production facilities, and there's a real opportunity to place YES individuals in those. The skill sets learned across all of this. I just want to talk to that, and then I'll hand back to you, Mark. So, we talk about there's primarily 2 sets of skill sets here. So the first is learning how to work. And it sounds simple and maybe a little, but it's true. Individuals are coming out of school and they're not work ready. And so getting into an environment where they learn the discipline of working, how to maintain time, how to keep records, how just to present themselves in that space. There's a whole set of skills around that. So there's a focus around that. And then there's a second focus around the actual skills. And each of these sets gives individual skills that are employable in those regions, ranging from the conservation and agricultural space through to infrastructure maintenance and through to the actual tourism space. this economy and these environments have been smashed by COVID, significant reductions in workforces, but they are coming back. And so there's real growth opportunity for youngsters that have got skill sets to actually get long-term employment as the conservation and tourism economies recover post-COVID. All right, let me pause there, Mark. Thank you.
Talking to myself there for a moment. Excellent, thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. And maybe, Andrew, before we kind of move to kind of question and answer, I mean, I know the kind of burning question for everybody that has been involved in either primarily those that have funded jobs around the ecotourism side of things relates to the absorption pathways and how the youth are going to ultimately be absorbed. Maybe just talking around, you know, one of the questions that will be is we funded the 12-month work experience. Are there actual absorption pathways, and how do you guys tackle it from your perspective?
Yeah, no, a fantastic question. So, I mean, you know, clearly it is a huge challenge, and it's a huge challenge across all sectors. In our particular environment, let me take these, there's three areas here. So the tourism space, what is interesting for me is to see the rebound of tourism. It's slow at the moment, but it's coming back. And in fact, I had a conversation 2 days ago with the regional director for and beyond in the area. And he was actually asking, so, you know, when are we able to absorb? Not, you know, how many. His question was, when are we able to absorb? And I found that fascinating because for me, it indicates that the sector is coming back. It was devastated, but now they're rebuilding. So there's a window of opportunity here for the next probably 3 to 4 years where the sector is going to grow again, just to where it was 2 years ago. And in that space, there's going to be employment opportunities. So I have absolute confidence around the tourism space coming back. The land care and community infrastructure are a little softer. Those are quite well established, but there what we're doing is we're building skills that are more generic and more employable. And so these are skills around land maintenance and infrastructure maintenance, which then translate into the biggest sectors, the industrial and agricultural sectors, as well as conservation. Again, real likelihood that these individuals will either migrate into some form of self-employment if they are not employed themselves directly. And the self-employment piece here is massive. So what we refer to as the hustle economy is another piece of our focus, and we are seeing dramatic growth in that space. So individuals with skills who are then able to establish micro enterprises that sell their skills back to service providers. So it's interesting in terms of how it's unpacking. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks, Andrew. And maybe just to give some context for those who are not familiar with this kind of absorption discussion and why it matters to you from a PE compliance perspective. So as we indicated, the requirement is for you to absorb either 2.5% or 5%, or have an absorption pathway for 2.5% or 5%. And what is it? What constitutes absorption? So youth cannot be absorbed into a learnership. Youth cannot be absorbed into a short-term contract. So effectively, and it's, you know, there's a number of debates around this, but youth can be absorbed into they need to be absorbed into a permanent employment contract. The implementation partners, as part of their service level agreements with YES, indicate that they will facilitate or attempt to facilitate the absorption pathway. Youth can be absorbed into and to Andrew's point around the establishment of a small business. So they could become an enterprise development beneficiary, and we're seeing some really interesting models coming through there. For instance, with if you were on the previous webinar where you've seen the Blossom project, youth start out, they get their 12-month work experience inside one of the micro franchises, ultimately become owners of these micro franchises, and could even graduate to suppliers or SED contributors in terms of the distribution of sanitary pads, for instance. So there's a number of things that we can have a look at there. And this question about early absorption is an interesting one, and I just want to maybe give a little bit of context around what the kind of thinking is there and what the kind of guidelines are. So one of the things that the legislation wanted to ensure was that YES wasn't used as a labor broking tool, and that YES was not part of an initiative where you could basically use where you could kind of have permanent employees without actually adding to your headcount. And there's a nuance around that new headcount that I'll talk to. So the idea is that if you identify youth, you employ them for the 12-month fixed term contract, and you then let them work through the period. Now, immediately what happens, a youth gets a couple of months of work experience, they discover how LinkedIn works, and they start shopping their CVs around. Now, the risk to you as the corporate funder is that these youth will drop off. The risk to the implementation partner is that they've invested in these youth, and now suddenly they've got to go and find replacements for them because they've dropped off. So one of the things we often get asked is whether or not these youth can be paid. What happens if the youth is going to get an offer for 500 Rand more at the lodge around the corner? Are you able to pay more to be able to retain those skills? Absolutely. We've seen some models with some of the partners where they create almost like a sliding scale. The longer the youth stays, their salaries build up over time. So obviously they start at the national minimum wage and then build up, or top up payments when they achieve skills or milestones, etc. So lots of fun things that they can do from that perspective. In terms of early absorption, the typical absorption pathway is the youth completes their 12-month work experience and then goes in month 13, they get their permanent employment contract. However, you might have a situation where, so we had it the other day, where one of the multinationals is a co-employer of these youth. They were a two-party employment contract with the implementation partner, but they had a very specific intent. They'd asked the implementation partner to recruit differently abled youth. And what happened was a youth got to the end of their 8th month, and we had an opportunity to go and join the corporate funder as part of their permanent headcount. So they were able to go and do that. So remember, once you pass the 8-month mark, youth don't need to be replaced. If they drop off before the 8-month mark, they need to be given a new 12-month fixed term contract. So there's interesting things that you can do with that, particularly if you're trying to bring differently abled youth into your organization. If, for instance, you are coming up to month 8, one of the risks is, from a youth perspective, is that they look at this and they say, I see I've only got 3 or 4 months left on my contract. Maybe I should, start applying for other jobs. And then they drop off, and you've invested 6, 7, 8 months in them, and suddenly you drop off. You do have the option of offering them a permanent contract, which could either run parallel or take place in the 13th month, depending on how you structure it. YES is one of those super flexible incentives that are out there, and we really do encourage people to, if you're not sure how you want to tackle it, work with IPs. You can do some really interesting things there, and we're more than happy to kind of guide you as to what works and what our experience has been from that side. I'm going to throw it out to the floor and see if there are any questions that you'd like answered, either from Farai, Andrew, or myself, in respect of what you've seen in the presentation. If there's anything you'd like, you can either drop it into the chat function, or you can put it into the Q&A, and we will respond. The appropriate person will respond. So I'll give you a couple of minutes just to pull up some questions that you might have there. First question in. So what I'm going to do, I'll just try and talk to this one, is just, please, can I explain the contracting framework one more time? Absolutely. So there are 2 agreements that are typically entered into. The first one is the employment agreement. You have the option of either a 2- or 3-party employment contract. The 2-party employment contract is the most common. It is a contract which sees the youth being directly employed by the implementation partner. So they assume all of the employment risk associated with that. In some cases, they may not even share the name of the corporate funder with the implementation partner, with the youth. The implementation partner obviously knows who the corporate funder is, but they will not then share that. So, particularly if you have a highly industrialized or aggressive labor or organized labor force, In a lot of cases, they may not want you to add additional youth, and the argument being, if you can pay for youth salaries, you should rather pay more to your existing workforce. The idea there could be a two-party employment contract where the implementation partner assumes the full employment risk. The third option is the three-party employment option, is where you have a co-employment agreement with the youth, and that typically relates to either if you're looking to bring differently abled youth onto your employment equity reports, or you are looking for them to be counted as, maybe looking to adjust your gender dynamics, whatever it is, opportunity to go there. Youth could, for instance, be seconded into enterprise development beneficiaries. There's a number of reasons that you might look at that. And then in that case, they will sit on your implementation, on your corporate payroll. In terms of the agreement that binds, yes, the implementation partner and the corporate funder, there's a three-party agreement that gets signed at the same time to be able to bind that, and will be used as evidence for your BBBE verification purposes. So this is a question we get asked quite a lot, and I'll get Farai to answer this one as well. Typically, so the question has come through around whether or not SMMEs can host youth, whether YES goes and places youth inside of SMMEs. Typically, the answer is no, we don't, and that relates to the vetting process. But I will also let Farai just talk about the thinking about how we pick the implementation partners and why this matters. So Farai, do you want to jump in there?
Yes, sure thing, Mark. So thanks so much for the question. And Mark is right. This is one we get asked quite often. What's important for us with the implementation partners is scale. So you'll notice that Conservation South Africa can take on 1,000 youth. The Africa Foundation can take on 400 youth. So when we are vetting the implementation partners, we are looking at, can you take on more than 100 youth at one time? And this is really, really important so that we can place as many youth as possible. Something that the implementation partners do to ensure that they can work with SMMEs is to place youth in hosts. So we do have two partners who work primarily with SMMEs. This is Africa Tikkun and the National Financial Literacy Association. They place youth in SMMEs. So when we have SMMEs who approach us as YES, we link them with those partners. How this would work is that should the partner like Africa Tikkun receive YES youth from a funder, and they've got places for 50 YES youth, they could then work with a variety of SMMEs who they have and give these SMMEs 5 youth each. The management of these youth would need to be done by the SMMEs, but according to YES, Africa Tikkun would be held accountable for the overall management and reporting to YES and to the sponsor. So it's definitely very possible to work with our implementation partners as hosts of YES Youth, such that they can take on large numbers and allocate you as an SMME some smaller numbers for the placements of youth. You can just send us an email and we'd be very, very happy to make these links with our IPs who work with SMMEs.
And that's to ip@yesforyouth.co.za?
Yes, that's correct. I'll also just write that in the chat.
Awesome, thanks. Kind of follow-up question that's come through is, what's the definition of a new job and why does it matter? So if you remember, for those who follow the YES story, the intent behind YES has always been the creation of new jobs. It doesn't help to just recycle people through job opportunities that do not have, that don't actually make a meaningful change in terms of the employment landscape in South Africa. So if you look, and I'm happy to share, if you're onto the YES website, there's a page that says BBBE benefits, and there's a number of documents at the bottom. There's a frequently asked questions a line item there. If you go and look at that, it'll answer this question around what is the definition of a new job. So new jobs are not measured by the verification agency, during the verification process. However, and I just flag this just because I've seen a couple of instances where this has come up in recent weeks. The intent behind these is that the organizations create new jobs. Now, what the verification agencies are looking at quite closely is the situation where where organizations are effectively using YES to facilitate something like a Section 189 process, and they're dropping their headcount and then not going and actually creating new jobs. And while it's not measured, the verification agency does have the mandate to be able to say you were not participating in the spirit and intent of the legislation. And we had a situation with one of the software companies where their headcount at the start of the measurement period was 40. The headcount at the end of the measurement period was actually 39 before the Yes Youth were, where the Yes Youth were counted. And they just wanted to understand exactly what that situation was. So you can imagine the scrutiny that comes up under those situations. You don't want to be in a situation where the verification agency is querying the nature and intent of your participation in the YES program. There is a follow-up question here. Can people earn qualifications or certifications along the way with the 12-month work experience? Just for 100% clarity, YES is not a learnership or an internship. You cannot double dip on it. You will have to, for those of you familiar with your BEE scorecard, you have a skills line item and then you have a YES line item. So YES is always additive. You achieve the rating and then you apply YES on top of that. In terms of can youth learn other skills along the way? Absolutely. We would love the youth to be able to pick up other skills as they go along, whether it is technical skills. The youth that work in the conservation fields will be learning about agriculture. The youth that are working in the drone environment are learning how to fly drones. It just comes down to whether or not you can't be double dipping the skills element and your YES participation. You can count up to 50% of the informal skills spent on your scorecard and work through that. So I hope that answers that question. We'll certainly be sharing the playback facility from this as well. I'm cognizant that we have 4 minutes left. I don't see any other questions that have come through. I've tried to consolidate a couple of the questions that are coming through. I'm just going to pop my email address into the chat facility as well for you to be able to have a look at. And if anyone wants to take this on afterwards, you're welcome to pop me a line. I'm going to give 1 more minute for any other questions to be submitted. And then I'm going to ask Farai and Andrew maybe just to give quick summary and their closing thoughts, and then we'll wrap up and circulate the link from there. Any other questions? Farai, then it's ladies first. Why should somebody participate in YES?
Thanks, Mark. I would definitely encourage those who are online and others to participate in YES, because we are in the thick of a youth unemployment crisis. There are 8 million young South Africans who don't have opportunities to participate in our economy. And now is the time for corporates, for government, for NGOs, for organizations to come together to make as much impact as possible. And YES is a fantastic way to do this. So we look forward to having you on board, working with our numerous implementation partners, creating an impact where it matters. Thanks, Mark.
See, I told you she could enunciate and summarize far better than I can. Andrew, can you have some closing comments from your side?
Sure, that's a tough act to follow, Farai. Just saying, I'm just going to make one point. YES makes a difference, and I know that corporate South Africa is under incredible pressure from an economic through social. This is an initiative that really does work. It is incredibly well structured, and it ensures that there is a legacy impact on the youth that are involved in these programs. And so strongly recommend, if you can back this, it makes a difference. Thank you.
Excellent. To our panelists, Andrew and Farah, thank you as always for giving up your time. It is hugely appreciated. And I think in a world that has lived behind computer screens for a while, it's always nice to hear the passion and the contribution that comes through. So to you guys, thank you very much for your time. To our attendees, again, your time is a valuable commodity. So we really appreciate you joining us today. As always, this is a two-way discussion. You know, we will give you our pitch, but we certainly want to be able to see how we can go and do other things with you. I've popped my email address into the chat facility, but the entire YES team is there to help. I always think of us as a big startup where everybody gets mucks in and tries to build out some really cool projects. So I'm really looking forward to engaging with you. To the regulars that we see on these webinars, thank you as always. Your support is seen and appreciated. And to the new faces, we look forward to building some programs with you. So ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and have a successful Wednesday. Enjoy your day.